Bonjour à tous.
Good evening. Welcome to this panel discussion. The theme is akin to a presidential project bringing together fractured France, and France is really fractured. It is as though France is even more fragmented in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's a paradoxical situation, and it raises many questions and issues. It was a collective ordeal. We shared the same ordeal. We thought that it was an illusion, but we were on an equal footing in terms of fear, diseases, public authorities, and we show some unity. There was a spirit of solidarity vis-à-vis others and vis-à-vis healthcare workers. And in the wake of this COVID-19 pandemic, in the wake of the lockdown, what have we witnessed? We've noticed that some social rifts have been compounded. 50% of executives were able to work from home. Only 5% of workers were able to work. A territorial rift, a digital divide, and a divide between the peoples and the people, the authorities. There was a lack of masks, so people were very defiant of the authorities. And some people felt they were protected. In fact, the country faced a structural decay. And we are not optimistic because, according to the French president, September will be tough and the months ahead will be quite thorny. How can we bring together a country that is fractured? How can we share a common destiny? How can we handle all these questions and issues? In 45 minutes, it will be quite difficult. We have Olivier Passtré from the Cercle des économistes, Cynthia FLEURY from the National Conservatoire of Arts and Crafts, Yves VEYRIER, General Confédération of Work, Philippe, CEO of La Poste, and Xavier BERTRAND, President of the Hauts-de-France region. Olivier Passtré, you can comment on this round-table panel discussion, and can you give us some background elements? So I'm always the one who has to co-moderate a round table. The most significant panel discussion of the Cercle des économistes meeting. It's a daunting privilege. So it's the most significant panel discussion because of the participants. We have a former minister, and if you consider the theme, the topic, if we could answer the question, bringing together a fractured France, if we could answer this question, it could be good. We could return home without any masks, and we would have made headway. But bringing together a fractured France, first, bringing together, and second, fractured. Regarding bringing together France, have some mental reservations. Bringing together, it is not cloud cuckoo land. We don't want to be brought together. We are a diverse country, and we should remain a diverse country. So instead of using bringing together, I would say reunification, to reunify. Then the fractures, the rifts, the divides. A few years ago, I was riding a horse, and I got 6 fractures. And I think that as part of this panel discussions, we'll deal more with than 6 fractures. First, the social divide, social fracture, globalization. Unlike what many people have said, globalization has lessened inequalities globally, but globalization has compounded many inequalities and imbalances, and the crisis that we faced in 2008 didn't improve the situation. So being able to climb up the social ladder. So this is the key to the future of France. Second fracture, second divide, territorial divide. I was in Camargue during the lockdown, and it's a totally different world. It was better to be in a provincial city than being in Paris, but most of the time that's not the case. So there's a territorial rift or divide that we'll have to handle. A third rift, economic fracture, divide. Some economic business sectors have been challenged to the full, aerospace and tourism. So life will never be like before. So in the field of economic divide, you have the blue chip companies and the SMEs. Multinational companies will be able to get their way through. But for the small businesses, it will be a bloodbath. It doesn't mean that the state hasn't taken some measures to help them. But if you look at the situation as it prevails, there is some cause for concern. So I think that we need to beef up the equity of the small businesses. Solvency II and Basel III rules will have to be removed. These rules are not adapted. Then fourth divide, ecology. So growth and pollution. How can you reconcile the two? It's a tough equation. It's not easy to manage this dichotomy. There's another fracture, ethnic divide. It is politically incorrect, but this is a tangible fact. I don't think that France is a racist country. There are some people who are racist in France, but there's something new. In France, you don't have racism, but different types of racism. So we'll have to manage these fractures, and then the generation-based fracture. You have on the one hand young people, 800,000 young people will enter the labor force, the labor market by September. So how are we going to take them into account, to care for them? It won't be an easy task. Second type of population, senior citizens. So people who are dependent. It's a major issue, and we'll have to embark upon this task. So we're late, by the way. So as part of this panel discussion, we'll have to come up with some proposals. Roosevelt, during the crisis of 29, what we must fear is fear. This is the situation that prevails. And when you are faced with fear, you need to demonstrate courage. So we will pull through, we will get through it. So this is the motto of the Cercle des économistes symposium. Cynthia Fleury, you are not with us. What's your take on that? What's your take on the situation that we are going through? So at each crisis, we have some leaders who are putting forward some solutions coming from the rank and file people, but I'm under the impression that these solutions and decisions are chopped up, and that's why people are disappointed. It's very difficult to come up with a diagnosis. Of course, there were some fractures and divides in the past. And over the past 10 years, we've been facing some fractures. The second point that is significant France hasn't been reconciled. There was a film in the 1950s. We are reconciled. La qualité du son est très mauvaise. Donc on essaye de faire de notre mieux. C'est l'interprète qui parle. Donc there's a fracture. It's a fact. We'll have to lay claim to a new position to heal the fractures. So there will be a period when it won't be possible for people to reconcile themselves. And I think that people will lay claim to some demands. It's complex because when people don't want to reconcile, it's even more difficult to sort out a problem. What are these solutions? We need to make sure that the social and economic life is better. So what is important for people is to climb up the career ladder in the corporate world. What is important is to move from one world to another. We want to make sure that people are given some welfare measures. People should get a job. It's important to protect people, but it will be quite thorny. I think that people will have to work more. So all the career paths will have to be more secure. So people will have to take more risks. So when there are risks, people need to feel secure. Then you have to consider the raison d'être. To reconcile people with work, you have the CSR, corporate social responsibility. You have to consider the situation of very small companies. So we need to regulate globalization. I'm not talking about de-globalization, but what is important is to have some reciprocal patterns in terms of trade. It's a national issue, international issue, European issue, national European challenge that we all need to take up. We need to tap the potential of new usages, in fact. We need to give some capabilities to workers. That's it for me. Thank you, Cynthia Fleury. The link was not quite good, to say the least. So, Philippe Val, your company has been able to focus on social bonds, on human bonds. Your company is both the first and last contact with some people who are isolated. So you are at the helm of the La Poste group. You've been able to link people together within your company and outside your company. Allow me to highlight methods. We've been talking about goals, objectives, solutions, but how can we find some solutions and which goals should we assign? Professor PASTRÉ told me not to embark upon a diagnosis, and he asked me to put forward some solutions. It's very difficult to come up with a solution to a problem that we haven't raised. It's very difficult to solve an equation that we haven't written. So our country is witnessing many rifts and fractures emphasized by Mr. PASTRÉ. I'm not going to repeat them. So all the countries on the planet are facing this situation, but there's a sort of French idiosyncrasy. If we are to provide some solutions, it's necessary to have some conflicts, some revolts. So it's a waste of time, it's a waste of energy, and it boils down to social and collective pain, and we should be in a position to overcome that. On this front, as you've said, Jean-Francis Pécresse, the very first step is to come up with a method that implies dialogue, partnership, co-building among partners. We should share projects and difficulties alike. Allow me to stress this method. This is a method that we try to adopt in our country. And this is a method that I deeply believe in. So when you consider the current crisis that we've gone through, we managed to post good results, but we made some mistakes nonetheless. But we managed to take good actions through partnership. During the crisis, we were able to deliver the public welfare schemes to more than 1.5 billion people. It wouldn't have been possible without partnering with the elected representatives, with the police forces, with the associations. So partnerships and solutions alike were indispensable. This is one of the lessons that we can draw from the crisis. In order to tackle the major issues, partnership is key, and we need to see eye to eye when it comes to projects. I could provide a collective solution and a specific solution. As regards the collective solution, we should dare, in order to change work. Telecommuting or working from home has changed the landscape. I don't think that working from home is a solution, is the solution. It's an instrument. Digitalization, lots of jobs are being put into question, are being challenged. So it means that the health crisis, together with the digitalization economy, are opportunities, golden opportunities that will help us change work. Working from home is important, but it is not the main thing. Teams were more accountable, more responsible. We had some teams that delegate some responsibilities. We worked with the 7 trade unions on a daily basis, on a permanent basis. We managed to sign some contracts during the crisis. So our country, our modern economy are facing an extraordinary opportunity, so we could change work. We can use working from home patterns. This is one of the instruments of human work. It is important. In our company, there are 220,000 in France, so there's a second dimension, the ecological dimension. I'm not going to talk about punitive ecology or ideological ecology. Ecology is a driver that will enable us to change the business model, the economic model. So we need to tap ecology in order to change our society and transform the economic model. I will give you an example. Urban logistics. What is urban logistics? It's a challenge that we need to take up and that we need to share with the big metropolitan areas, with local authorities, We want to change our territories, our regions through urban logistics and through ecology. What does it mean in practical terms? Altogether, we could have a carbon-free economy for the transportation of commodities in the years to come, in the next 6 years. So it's a positive project for the mayors, for the civil society, associations, elected representatives, businesses and companies. And we are equipped with the technological instruments to do that. So we can change work, but we can use ecology in order to transform the economic model, and we can transform and change our towns and cities. And this is within reach. And La Poste as a company will have a role to play. But what is important is to share and to partner with others. Thank you, Philippe. Yves VEYRIER, General Secretary of Force Ouvrière. When you read what the President has said, I mean, to focus again on pension reform, to almost to work more, to revisit the 35-hour work week. So if you consider the economy, will be facing an in-depth economic crisis. How can we avoid social problems?
Since the question was, what do you mean by reuniting? I think that first we should avoid the constant disruption that leads to destabilization or generalized destabilization. And in fact, I don't think this would be the best idea to, within the current context of the health crisis, which is not over, that's what our president said, and its dire social and economic consequences. We focus much more on Airbus, Air France, the automobile sector, and the job losses, as well as the very small companies. So this is not an opportunity, whatever the analysis you make, to tackle subjects such as the 35-hour weeks. I think that we should try to find some serenity within society. Second, I do not believe that conflict is a waste of time. If you mean that revolt is necessary? No, I think you need, within the debate, to have meaning and knowledge, so that instead of conflict, you have a debate. So we were talking about social mobility, and what the crisis highlighted, well, of course, there was the health sector, but also people standing in the second lines. When I came to the Confédération by the end of 2018, I said we need to have a campaign called "Let us reconsider the jobs that are devoted to service to the persons." That is helping the people individually. And the example I took was that those jobs are essential because a financial engineer with an overbooked agenda and with a large income could not do such a job if he didn't have people to take care of his kids, his parents, grandparents, dependent grandparents in some cases, or ironing his shirts. But those people earn the minimum wages, and their employments are quite frail, and there is no prospect for social mobility whatsoever. So it would be interesting to re-evaluate those jobs. So we need skilled people. We must be exacting with them because we entrust them with our dearest. So the prospect we offer employees cannot be only, and this was true also for people working in the house cleaning systems, people who work very early or very late and that you don't see. So should we have a general conference concerning the wage scale, for instance? I think we should reconsider those jobs individually. And the president, when he gave his interview and mentioned the second line, in fact, the front line was mentioned extensively, but people started talking about the second line. For example, people taking care of our waste or postmen. And the president referred to them saying, with the universal pension system, they will be in a better place, which is wrong. And I showed that recurringly. And on top of that, it means you'll be rewarded in 43 years' time if you work consistently. I think we have to review this completely. And then finally, and this is a plea for the role of unions, solidarity, consent to solidarity must prevail. For example, Social Security was financed by 90% through contribution, and it came from a negotiation between employers and the unions. What was a net salary and what were part of contribution going to the Social Security. Now, this was decreased to 55%, and we added a tax. So that, in fact, this aspect of tax for solidarity tended to disappear. And we saw with the government that, in fact, instead of negotiated, they decided to impose some sort of an unemployment insurance. And now the government realizes it was a mistake. So we need to find more space for collective discussions instead of having a central state deciding for everyone. So we have to have more meaning concerning solidarity and representative democracy. And I think it is very important for the decision makers to control the economy again, because it feels like the decision makers decided the economy prevailed. And there's a strong difference between market economy and government. And the financial market are completely disconnected from real economy, which is a real problem. Okay, Philippe Bertrand, Xavier Bertrand, sorry. I'll hand you the floor, sorry, because there's a Philippe in the round table. Of course, we've been debating on a very special day because the Prime Minister has been elected, Jean Castex, who's on right wing but has a social concern. He was trained by you and he worked in your ministries. So it's difficult for me not to ask the question, is he the man to reconnect the people and to reunite a divided or fractured France? Well, the head is the head of state. He's the one to make the decisions. And then, depending upon this, we'll see what Emmanuel Macron decides to protect the French people, the economy, to find some sort of recovery, because we'll be facing a tsunami in September. That's only what matters. All the information channels will be talking about this for the next few days. Now, the French people would like to think about the holidays because there was a sanitary drama, and they don't really know what will happen in September, but we do, because when you see that air companies do not order planes to Airbus, you know that some people will be dismissed because some jobs won't be kept. Instead, the government decides to order Rafale more quickly. So either people will be unemployed or they'll need to change jobs. So the jobs of the decision makers is to be quick and efficient and to realize this is an emergency. We know what the consequences will be. In hotels, in restaurants, some shops won't reopen. And under the circumstances, we can comment upon those, but this is not what the people are expecting from us. So very clearly, let me tell you, we talked about a war against the virus, but now this is a war against unemployment. So if we're efficient and if there's a recovery plan, and I still don't understand why the recovery plan will take place in September, because it would take weeks for it to be applied throughout the territory. So we need a recovery plan that will be efficient, so as to avoid breakdowns, and it will also allow to create activity and create new jobs. Of course, unemployment will increase, but if we're efficient, we will avoid some unemployed. So we have to change habits and tactics. This week, I voted for a recovery plan, so I'm going to give you the figure. It's 1.3 billion euros for the next 18 months. But what matters is not the figure. What matters is how. How will I manage to put the money within the regional economy so as to create activity and have less unemployed people? I won't prevent the increase of unemployment, but I hope it won't be as high as expected. So, how will you use the money? Well, it will go to everyone. Big corporations such as very small companies, SMEs. And concerning the money, half of it is about investment credits so that the companies can be supported or so that they can find funds. Why do not we transform some of our PGs into bonds? What are we waiting for? Are people waiting, saying we have to work with the banks and see how it goes? We have to react more quickly so that businesses can have fundings to reindustrialize and also to support the local businesses. In fact, I believe our memory is very short-term. All the people that were in the second lines and who avoided us who helped us to have food on our tables, we thanked them. But what about the companies who collapsed? In my region, I decided to have holiday vouchers for the people who worked physically throughout the crisis and did not get any bonus or premium. I thought, well, people told me, well, people won't be interested. In fact, within the next 2 days, 8,600 files had been filled. So we cannot keep on thanking people and then forgetting about them, because this won't hold. And we have this social conscience. So the idea is to encourage the value of work. Now, finally, another time bomb concerns freelance workers. If they don't have an activity, if there's no recovery, they won't have anything because there is no subvention for them. So from one day to the next, they cannot pay for their housing, for their credits, for their food, unless they live with a partner who can provide for the family. So we know what should be done, especially with the funds of the company. We know what should be done with unemployment, but the reform that should be, that was predicted won't hold. Well, the president said it won't be applied. Because if the reform applies, it means that mechanically some people won't have indemnities or will have indemnities with minus 200 euros, which is a lot to them. Now, in your region, will you support some companies and become stakeholders of some corporations? We'll have public and private financing, and it will amount to 0.5 to 1 billion euros. So we are trying to have some sort of a third revolution so that we can convert, we can have this ecological transition so that we can work on with green energy, have a greener industry and economy, because the environment is a main issue. So yes, we are investing very clearly, which leads us in certain conditions to be a stakeholder in some corporation. But the state can have debts. I cannot, because my debt is not guaranteed by the Central Bank of Europe. And the issue is also a European one with the European Central Bank. Don't you think it's time, after 30 years, after Maastricht, because the initial goal was to fight inflation, couldn't we have another goal that would be full employment? Because the American Federal Reserve says clearly we want to favor employment. Couldn't we do that in the and write that in the goals of the European Central Bank? So there's this debate between the state operating as a firefighter, because Xavier, you're being critical. No, the reaction was very interesting, but it's not about being a firefighter any longer. It's about being an architecture, building the architecture of the future. Now, what about public health devices? Shouldn't we focus on recovery plans instead? Well, temporary layoffs, for temporary layoffs, the goal is to preserve jobs for some people and for a certain lapse of time, because people are not using airlines, because people are not buying cars any longer. So once the crisis has been overcome, if we have kept some jobs, well, then we preserve purchasing power at a local level, because household consumption is very important in France compared to Germany, for instance. And we also preserve skills. the idea would be probably to use temporary layoffs and have training periods so that the people could find new abilities. So we're not critical about those devices. Now, the question of recovery is completely different because the state should be both operator and consumer so as to have an economy in full recovery. And the jobs on the second lines at large are not jobs that you can move from one region to another. Otherwise, you will change the sociology of the job. And females are mostly concerned. Cynthia Fleury, maybe we'll come back to you if you're still with us. Now, do you agree with this analysis? Do you think we missed a chance through lesser premiums to the people working in healthcare? Do you think that rebuilding confidence requires to re-evaluate some jobs and to grant premiums to workers? Yes, re-evaluating people working in healthcare generally is absolutely crucial. Because those cares are very important. So it's dreadful to see that teams working in hospitals or elsewhere, doctors, nurses, even hospital directors, when the lockdown stopped, they said, oh my God, it's awful, everything will be back to square one. We need more autonomy, more initiative. We must change the prices. We must work in co-management. But in fact, we will be back to the older days, whereas the crisis was, they bore the full brunt of the crisis. So we should reevaluate, generally speaking, those jobs. And then what we witness is that policymakers are coming back so that the economy is at the service of the politicians. So state and region should be the first players in this situation.
Pour conclure.
So 1 minute by way of conclusion, 30 seconds. Xavier Bertrand pointed out an economic tsunami, and Yves VEYRIER referred to that. In our country, you have a lot of potential of value. We have the local jobs to visit old people, you have postmen providing some meals to care for old people. So we need to use this potential. We need to tap this potential. So it means that our society would be more empathetic, more caring, and closer to people. Because when you are old, it means that you are alone. So it's important to come up with public policies and players who deal with that. Olivier, in 1 minute. No, I won't need a minute. 30 seconds would be enough. Will be enough. So I mentioned the 6 divides and fractures. There's also an ethnic fracture, but it's a different kettle of fish, but we need to handle it. So I think that we've done our job. We can close this panel discussion, but listening to all of you, there's an important phrase, climbing up the social ladder. Training, education are intertwined. This is what is at stake. and we'll have to invest in training and education. Of course, we won't have sorted out the crisis, but we'll be able to heal some of the divides, some of the rifts and fractures. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Cynthia, Fleury. Have a good evening. And the Cercle des économistes symposium continues. Thanks to all of you.